Did you know that the book of Revelation mentions 4 mysterious women who can reveal profound truths about your spiritual life? In this video, we will explore who these women are, what they represent, and most importantly, how their stories can impact you today. If you've ever wondered about the path you're on, or feel there are areas in your life that need spiritual change, this video will surprise you. Watch until the end and discover how these 4 figures can help you identify who you truly are before God. Are you closer to purity or living in dangerous duality? Get ready for a reflection to transform how you view your faith and your daily decisions. If you're searching for spiritual answers or trying to find your purpose, don't go anywhere. Every minute of this video could guide you towards something that might change your life. Who is Jezebel? In Revelation chapter 2, Jesus warns the church of Thyatira about Jezebel, a woman who calls herself a prophetess and seduces God's servants into sexual immorality and idolatry. But is Jezebel just a figure from the past? Or could she, in some way, still represent attitudes and behaviors that many of us adopt today, often without realizing it? Think about your own life. Are you married but secretly watching inappropriate websites while maintaining an appearance of fidelity? Or perhaps you're engaging in conversations and relationships that you know cross moral boundaries. Jezebel symbolizes those who seem to live a religious life, secretly nurture behaviors that compromise their faith. Have you ever considered how small concessions can lead to major deviations? Are you involved in any form of sexual immorality, even in secret? Maybe you attend church, pray, and participate in religious activities, but deep down, you know there's something in your life that's not aligned with the principles you stand for. Jezebel seduced God's servants into these traps. And the same could be happening today without you even realizing. Moreover, Jezebel also promoted idolatry, placing other priorities ahead of God. Is money, success, or fleeting pleasures taking the place of God in your life? You may say you're faithful, but what do your actions reveal? Jezebel serves as a warning to those living a double life, and Jesus warns that without repentance, this path leads to serious consequences. Now is the time to reflect. Are you living like Jezebel, being seduced by behaviors that pull you away from God? What's at stake is not just your reputation, but the integrity of your faith and your relationship with the Creator. What are you willing to change to break this cycle? Who is the woman clothed with the sun, and what does she represent to us? In Revelation 12:1-2, we see the image of a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. She is pregnant and cries out in labor pains. This woman is widely interpreted as the nation of Israel, God's chosen people, anxiously awaited the coming of the Messiah. But there's something important to note here. Although this people received the promises, many rejected Jesus Christ as the only way to God. Are you, like this woman, searching for spiritual answers, but have yet to recognize Jesus as the only truth? The Jewish people are known for their deep religiosity, their devotion to traditions and the law. They diligently follow commandments and the religious system, but many still do not accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah, Son of God, sent to bring salvation. Have you ever found yourself in a similar dilemma? Perhaps you are someone who is deeply dedicated to your faith, who follows rituals, who holds great respect for religious values, but have not yet accepted that Jesus is the only way to a true connection with God. In John 14:6, Jesus clearly says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." But sometimes, in our spiritual search, do we also reject this truth? We may be seeking peace, purpose, and spiritual connection, but without recognizing that the only way to achieve that is through Jesus Christ. Are we, like the people of Israel, clinging to religiosity without accepting that Jesus is the missing key in our lives? The woman clothed with the sun represents this longing for redemption. The labor pains symbolize the struggle and resistance in accepting the true Savior. Are you also in an internal battle, trying to find God, but without accepting that Jesus is the only way to make that connection? The dragon that appears in Revelation 12:4, trying to devour the woman's child, is a symbol of how the enemy wants to destroy the truth, for it is born in our hearts. Are there forces in your life trying to prevent you from fully accepting the truth of Christ? This woman represents us in our own spiritual struggles when we are religious but do not fully live out the truth that Jesus has revealed to us. Are you living a genuine faith, or merely practicing religiosity that doesn't truly connect you to God? This is an invitation to reflect on the path you have been following and to recognize that the only bridge to God is Christ. The mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth symbolizes much more than just a physical figure. She represents a false, corrupted, global religious system that will dominate the world during the period of tribulation. But who is this great prostitute, and what does she mean for the spiritual fate of humanity? The great prostitute is the depiction of a deceptive and perverse religious system, one that seduces nations and their leaders, promoting idolatry and sexual immorality. In Revelation 17:15, we are told that the waters you saw where the prostitute sits, peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. This indicates that the influence of the great prostitute will not be limited to one region or people, but will spread across the world, affecting all nations and peoples. This global religious system will be inclusive and permissive, accepting moral practices that contradict God's teachings, especially regarding sexuality. Sexual immorality is one of the trademarks of the great prostitute. She leads the nations in abominable practices, where what is morally wrong will be promoted as normal and even desirable. This false religious system will encourage sexually immoral and permissive behaviors, breaking away from the standards established by God. Are we already seeing signs of this in our current society, where behaviors that were once rejected are now celebrated and normalized? This woman represents a world that completely distances itself from biblical values, offering temporary pleasures and indulgence, but ultimately leading people to spiritual destruction. In addition to promoting immorality, the great prostitute will be responsible for persecuting those who do not submit to her corrupt system. During the tribulation, Christians who refuse to worship false gods and follow the idolatrous and immoral practices of this system will face intense persecution. Revelation 17 verse 6 describes the great prostitute as drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. This means that those who remain faithful to Christ during the tribulation will be hunted, martyred, and exterminated for their faith. Have you ever wondered if you could keep your faith intact in the face of such brutal persecution? This persecution will be a collaboration between the false religious system and the world's rulers, as also indicated in Revelation 17:16-17, where the 10 horns and the beast, representing kings and the Antichrist, will hate the prostitute, leaving her desolate and naked. Although there will initially be an alliance between the prostitute and political and economic leaders, this alliance will be temporary. Once the Antichrist has consolidated his power, he will destroy the great prostitute to take absolute control, uniting religious and political power under one domain. The system led by the great prostitute will be the predominant religion in the world during the tribulation. It will be a religion without truth, without commitment to holiness, promoting a false sense of unity. Can you already see how the world is moving towards a system that values moral relativity and the rejection of absolutes? This religious system will be a mix of beliefs that will attract those seeking spirituality, but who reject Jesus Christ as the only way to God, as taught in John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. During the tribulation, the system of the great prostitute will be a unifying force among nations, seducing people with promises of freedom and prosperity, but in reality, leading them into spiritual deception. It will be a system that promotes worship of the Antichrist and the acceptance of morally corrupt behaviors. However, the prostitute will not hold power forever. Revelation 18 describes her sudden downfall when God will judge and completely destroy this corrupt system. Her ruin will be so devastating that nations and kings will mourn her destruction, but by then it will be too late. Figure of the great prostitute is a warning to all of us. Have you ever wondered if, in some way, you are being seduced by systems or values that seem spiritual, but actually lead you away from the truth? The prostitute represents everything that deceives, seduces, and promises temporary pleasure and satisfaction, but in the end, leads to spiritual ruin. Her fate is sealed, and God will bring justice to all those who remain faithful to him, despite the persecution and temptations of this corrupt system. Question that remains is, will you stand firm on the day God destroys this corrupt system? Or will you be found among those who were seduced by its empty promises? The time to choose is now. Clothing that the bride wears is not something common. Revelation 19:8 explains that this fine linen symbolizes the righteous acts of the saints. Are you living in a way that prepares you for this moment? Jesus is seeking those who live in purity, in righteousness, those who follow him faithfully and sincerely, even in a world that constantly tries to corrupt. Revelation 19:9 continues, saying, "Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb." This shows us that the bride of Christ is not just a symbolic image, but a glorious destiny reserved for those who remain faithful until the end. The bride of Christ is the church, and those who belong to this church have the privilege of participating in this great celebration. Have you ever asked yourself if you are living in a way worthy of being called to this wedding? The bride of Christ and the modern world. In today's world, where sexual immorality, idolatry, and spiritual corruption are increasingly common, the bride of Christ reminds us that we are called to live differently. While the world is corrupted with false promises and temporary pleasures, the bride is called to maintain her spiritual purity. Have you been protecting your faith in a world that tries to seduce you away from Christ? The contrast between the bride of Christ and the great prostitute, who also appears in Revelation, could not be clearer. While the prostitute represents falsehood and corruption, the bride of Christ represents purity and truth. In the time of tribulation, many will be seduced by the corrupt system of the great prostitute, but the true bride will remain faithful to Jesus. Does your life reflect the faithfulness of the bride, or have you been drawn in by the systems and values of the world? The hope of the bride. The message of the bride of Christ is one of hope and victory. Revelation 19 verse 7-9 reveals that the bride is ready for the wedding of the Lamb, an event that symbolizes the eternal union between Jesus and his church. Those who are faithful to him will be called to this great celebration, where they will partake in the supper with Christ himself. Have you ever wondered if you are ready for this moment? Being part of the bride of Christ means living a life committed to him, maintaining faith and purity, regardless of the pressures of the world. The invitation to the wedding is open, but it is up to each of us to prepare for this meeting. Are you preparing? Christ is ready to receive those who remain faithful, and the reward will be participation in this eternal union with him. Now that you've heard about these 4 women mentioned in the book of Revelation, Jezebel, the woman clothed with the sun, the great prostitute, and the bride of Christ, question is, which one represents you? Does your life reflect the choices and behaviors of Jezebel, where your actions don't align with the faith you profess? Or perhaps you identify with the woman clothed with the sun, someone who is devout, still resists accepting Jesus as the only way to God. You might see yourself influenced by the false and corrupt system of the great prostitute, following values and ideologies that, although attractive, pull you away from Christ. Or are you part of the bride of Christ, the one who remains faithful, living in purity and holiness, ready for the great meeting with the Lamb? Choice is yours. The question is not just how the world sees you, but how you see yourself spiritually. Who are you before God? The invitation to become part of the bride of Christ is open, but it requires a decision, faithfulness, commitment, and a life dedicated to him. Which of these women represents the path you are following today? If you want to learn more about examples of faith and courage, don't miss the next video, where we will dive into the incredible story of King David, a man who, even when facing giants and challenges, remained faithful to God and had a heart after God's own heart. Click the link, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to get notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. See you next time.